They say the eyes are the windows to the soul, but in my house, the floorboards hold the truth. My name is Gladys, and at 65 years old, I thought I'd seen every shade of human darkness. I was a nurse for 35 years. I've seen men take their last breaths while confessing to sins that would make a preacher faint. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment my 7-year-old grandson, Desmond, dropped his fork during Sunday dinner and changed my life forever. It was a quiet afternoon in our suburban home. The smell of my signature smothered chicken was still heavy in the air. My daughter, Nia, sat across from me, looking as polished and perfect as ever. Beside her was her husband, Quentin. On the surface, they were the golden couple of the neighborhood. Quentin was a high-ranking city official, a man who spoke about community safety while wearing suits that cost more than my first car. But I always felt a chill when he entered a room. It was a coldness that didn't match his bright smile. "Desmond, honey, eat your greens," Nia said, her voice tight. She'd been nervous lately, jumping at the sound of a door closing. Desmond didn't move. He wasn't looking at his plate. He was staring at the space beneath the heavy, antique mahogany table, the one that had been in our family for 3 generations. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice trembling so hard it barely carried across the table. "Yes, baby." I reached out to pat his hand, but he pulled away, shrinking back into his chair. "Don't look now," he breathed, his eyes wide and watering. "But the lady under the table, she says Quentin is a liar. She says she's tired of being stepped on." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt the blood drain from my face, a physical sensation of ice rushing through my veins. I didn't laugh. I didn't tell him he had an overactive imagination. Because the moment the words left his mouth, Quentin's glass hit the floor. It didn't just fall. It shattered, shards of crystal spraying across the hardwood like tiny diamonds. I looked at Quentin. The man of the people wasn't smiling anymore. His jaw was set so tight, I thought his teeth might crack. His eyes weren't on the broken glass. They were fixed on Desmond with a look of predatory hatred that made my stomach turn. "He's just tired, Gladys," Quentin said, his voice dropping an octave into a low, menacing growl. "Nia, take the boy upstairs." Now, Nia didn't argue. She grabbed Desmond's arm a bit too roughly, her face a pale sheet of panic. As they hurried out of the room, Desmond looked back at me one last time. He pointed a small, shaking finger toward the floor, directly beneath Quentin's heavy leather boots. I waited until I heard their footsteps fade on the stairs. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew I should stay still. I knew I should pretend I heard nothing. But the nurse in me, the woman who had spent decades looking for symptoms of a deeper rot, couldn't let it go. "Quentin," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Move your feet." "Excuse me?" He leaned forward, the shadows of the dining room chandelier dancing in his eyes. "You heard me. Move your chair back." I dropped my earring. It was a lie, and we both knew it. He didn't move. Instead, he reached across the table and gripped my wrist. His hand was clammy. "Gladys, you're getting old. Maybe the house is too big for you. Maybe you're starting to hear things, just like that boy. Don't go looking for things that don't want to be found." He let go, stood up, and walked out without another word. I sat there in the dim light, my wrist throbbing where he'd squeezed it. The house felt different, heavier. I took a deep breath, dropped to my knees, and lifted the long, lace tablecloth. I expected to see dust. I expected to see nothing. But as I crawled under that mahogany fortress, my hand brushed against something that wasn't wood. It was a loose floorboard, slightly askew, hidden perfectly by the pedestal of the table. I pried it up with trembling fingers. Inside the hollow space wasn't money or jewelry. It was a small digital recorder and a blood-stained ID badge belonging to a woman who had gone missing from the city hall 3 months ago. And then I heard the click of a lock. I wasn't alone in the dining room anymore. The click of the dining room door wasn't just a sound. It was a death sentence. I stayed huddled under that heavy mahogany table, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The blood-stained ID badge of Janelle Vance, the city clerk who had disappeared 3 months ago, felt like a hot coal in my palm. The digital recorder was small, cold, and heavy with the weight of a life snuffed out. I heard the heavy, rhythmic thud of leather soles on the hardwood. Quentin. He hadn't left the house. He had been waiting for me to take the bait. Gladys. His voice came from right above me, muffled by the thick wood of the table, but sharp enough to pierce my soul. I told you not to look for things that don't want to be found. Curiosity killed the cat, but in this house, it's going to kill the peace. I didn't breathe. I pressed my back against the central pedestal of the table, pulling my knees to my chest. I felt like a child playing hide and seek, except the seeker was a man who had likely scrubbed Janelle's blood off his own hands. I know you're under there, he whispered. I could hear him leaning over the table. The wood groaned under his weight. You think you're so smart. The retired nurse. The pillar of the church. But you're just an old woman who doesn't know when to mind her own business. I squeezed the recorder. My thumb found the play button. I didn't mean to press it, but my hand was shaking so violently that I felt the subtle click. A tinny, distorted voice filled the space under the table. It was Janelle. She was crying. Please, Quentin, I won't tell anyone about the zoning kickbacks. I'll quit. I'll move to Georgia. Just let me go home to my kids. Then, a sound I will never forget. A wet, sickening thud, followed by a silence so profound it felt like the world had ended. Above me, I heard Quentin's breath hitch. The jig was up. He knew I had heard the evidence. He knew I knew he wasn't just a corrupt politician. He was a predator. Give it to me, Gladys, he said, his voice now devoid of any emotion. It was flat, clinical, and utterly terrifying. Come out from under there. Hand over the recorder, and maybe we can talk about a retirement home that doesn't involve a pine box. I realized then that Nia and Desmond were upstairs. My daughter was married to a monster, and my grandson was living in a house with a man who had bodies in his past. I couldn't just stay under here and die. I had to be the wolf I'd spent 65 years pretending I wasn't. Quentin, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I've spent 40 years handling men bigger and meaner than you in the ER. I've seen them cry for their mothers when the end came. You think you can scare me? I crawled out from the other side of the table, standing up slowly. My joints popped, a reminder of my age, but my eyes were locked on his. He was standing by the door, blocking the only exit. He looked different now. The golden boy persona had vanished, replaced by a hollow-eyed sociopath. The badge Gladys, and the recorder. Now, he took a step toward me. You killed her in the office, didn't you? I asked, backing away toward the kitchen island. And you brought her things here? Why? A trophy? Or did you just need to feel the power over her even after she was gone? I didn't want to do it, he muttered, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for a witness. She was going to ruin everything. The redevelopment project, the funding. I worked too hard to let a clerk bring me down. So you brought the rot into my house. I spat. Under the table where my grandson eats his cereal. You brought a dead woman's ghost into this sanctuary. He lunged. I was 65, but I wasn't slow. I grabbed the heavy glass pitcher of iced tea from the island and swung it with every bit of strength my nursing-hardened arms possessed. It caught him across the temple. He staggered. a look of pure shock crossing his face as tea and blood splattered his white button-down. You old witch, he hissed, clutching his head. I'm not an old witch, Quentin, I said, grabbing a serrated bread knife from the block. I'm the woman who's going to make sure you never see the sun as a free man again. Now get out of my way. I heard Nia scream from the top of the stairs. Mom, Quentin, what's happening? I looked up, and for a split second, I saw Desmond peeking through the banister, his eyes wide with a trauma that would take years to heal. In that moment, something in me snapped. The peaceful grandmother died, and a cold, calculating vengeance took its place. Quentin wasn't going to jail. Not yet. Jail was too easy for a man like him. He needed to be dismantled. Nia, take Desmond to the car. I screamed. Go to Mrs. Gable's house. Don't look back. Quentin recovered faster than I expected. He blocked the hallway, a cruel smirk returning to his face. Nobody is going anywhere, Gladys. You think you're a hero? You're just a witness who stayed too long. He reached into his waistband and pulled out a small, sleek pistol. He didn't point it at me. He pointed it toward the stairs where Nia and Desmond were huddled. Give me the evidence, he whispered, or they go first. The cold steel of the pistol pointed at my daughter and grandson didn't make me scream. It didn't make me beg. Instead, a terrifyingly calm stillness settled over my bones. I've seen men shot, stabbed, and broken in the emergency room. I know what fear looks like, and right now, Quentin was reeking of it. He was a cornered rat in a designer suit. Put the gun down, Quentin, I said, my voice as flat as a heart monitor's hum. You kill them and you lose your leverage. You kill me, and you still have a body to dispose of in a house full of neighbors who saw you pull into the driveway. Shut up, Gladys, he roared, his hand shaking. Give me the recorder. Give me the ID. I'll walk out of here, and we can pretend this was a home invasion. I'll make sure the police believe it. I am the police's boss, remember? Upstairs, Nia was sobbing, clutching Desmond to her chest. Quentin, please. What are you doing? We're your family. Family is a liability. Nia, he yelled back, not taking his eyes off me. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my hand slipping behind me toward the spice rack. Not for salt, but for something much more potent. I had a jar of concentrated lye I used for making homemade soap, caustic, dangerous, and blinding. You think you're the only one with secrets in this house, Quentin? I asked, slowly unscrewing the lid behind my back. I've lived in this neighborhood for 40 years. I know the ancestors of these trees. I know which neighbors watch through their blinds and which ones are heavy sleepers. And I know that your redevelopment project isn't just about money. It's about the land Janelle Vance was trying to protect. The land where her body is currently cooling, isn't it? Quentin's eyes flickered. A hit. I don't know what you're talking about. The old quarry on Sutton Road. I bluffed, watching his pupils dilate. The one you're planning to pave over with a shopping mall. It's a convenient place for a grave, isn't it? Too bad for you. Janelle wasn't just a clerk. She was a meticulous record keeper. She left a trail that even a crooked politician like you can't erase. Give it to me. He lunged forward, closing the distance between the dining room and the kitchen. I didn't flinch. As he reached for my throat with his free hand, I swung my arm around and threw the handful of lye crystals directly into his sweating face. The scream that tore from his throat wasn't human. It was a high-pitched, agonizing wail that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. He dropped the gun, clutching his eyes as the caustic chemicals began to react with the moisture on his skin. My eyes. My eyes. You old hag, you blinded me, he shrieked, collapsing to his knees and clawing at his face. I didn't stop. I kicked the pistol across the floor, sending it skittering under the refrigerator, where he'd never find it. Then, I grabbed the heavy cast iron skillet from the stove, The one I'd used to fry that chicken he enjoyed so much and brought it down with a sickening crack against his temple. He slumped over, unconscious, his face already blistering from the lie. "Nia, get down here now," I shouted. My daughter ran down the stairs, Desmond tucked behind her. She stopped at the kitchen entrance, gasping at the sight of her husband, the powerful, untouchable Quentin, broken and bleeding on the linoleum. "Mom, is he?" "He's alive," I said, grabbing a roll of heavy-duty duct tape from the utility drawer. "But the Quentin you knew is dead. The man on this floor is a murderer, Nia. He killed Janelle Vance. He was going to kill us." Desmond stepped out from behind his mother. He wasn't crying anymore. He looked at the man on the floor, then at me. "Grandma, is the lady under the table happy now?" A chill ran down my spine. I looked back at the dining room. The shadows seemed to dance under that mahogany table, as if something or someone was finally at rest. "She's not happy yet, baby," I whispered, beginning to wrap the tape around Quentin's wrists with clinical precision. "She won't be happy until justice is served. And I'm going to serve it on a very cold plate." I looked at Nia. "Call Officer Miller, not the precinct. His personal cell. Tell him there's been a medical emergency at my house. And Nia, start packing. We aren't just leaving. We're burying a monster." But as I looked at the digital recorder on the counter, I realized the recording didn't just have Quentin's voice. It had another voice, a voice that belonged to someone much higher up the food chain than a city official. The betrayal went deeper than I ever imagined. My son-in-law was just the errand boy. I dragged Quentin's heavy, limp body toward the basement door. My 65-year-old back protested, but adrenaline is a powerful anesthetic. Nia stood paralyzed, her hands over Desmond's eyes. "Nia, snap out of it," I barked, the same tone I used in the ER when a code blue was called. "Go to the laundry room. Get the heavy-duty zip ties and the rolls of plastic sheeting. Now, Mom, we should call the police. The real police," she stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "The real police report to the man whose voice is on that recorder." "Nia," I said, pausing to catch my breath. "If we call 911, a squad car will show up, Quentin will be escorted to a private hospital, and we will disappear before the sun rises. Do you understand? There is no law in this city that Quentin doesn't own a piece of." I looked at the digital recorder sitting on the counter. The second voice, the one Quentin was talking to, belonged to Senator Sterling, the man who had just been featured on the news for his urban renewal initiative. It wasn't a project. It was a land grab built on the bones of people like Janelle Vance. I got Quentin down the basement stairs, sliding him step by step until he landed in a heap on the concrete floor. I turned on the overhead fluorescent light. It flickered and hummed, casting a sickly green glow over the room. This was my crafting space where I made my soaps, my lotions, and where I kept my medical supplies. It was soundproofed, a feature I'd added years ago so I could run my heavy mixers in peace. Now it was a dungeon. I hoisted him into my heavy oak work chair and began the process. Zip ties around the ankles. Zip ties around the chest. I used the duct tape to seal his mouth, leaving just enough room for him to breathe through his nose, assuming the lie hadn't swollen his nasal passages shut yet. Nia came down, trembling, clutching the plastic sheeting. She looked at her husband, the man she'd shared a bed with for 8 years, and I saw the moment her heart finally broke. The love died, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. "He killed her, didn't he?" she whispered. "Janelle. She was my friend, Mom. We had lunch a week before she went missing. He killed her because she found the ledger," I said, pointing to the ID badge I'd tucked into my pocket. "And he kept this badge as a trophy. Or maybe as insurance. Quentin isn't as smart as he thinks he is. He's a hoarder of sins." Suddenly, Quentin groaned. His eyes, or what was left of them, fluttered open. The lie had turned the whites of his eyes into a milky, clouded mess. He tried to scream, but the duct tape turned it into a pathetic, muffled whimper. He strained against the zip ties, the plastic biting into his expensive suit. "Don't struggle, Quentin," I said, leaning in close so he could smell the lavender soap on my skin. "It only makes the circulation cut off faster. And as a nurse, I can tell you exactly how long it takes for gangrene to set in. We have plenty of time." I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 10 years. Isaiah. He was an old flame from my younger days, a man who had traded his badge for a private investigator's license when he realized the system was rigged. "Gladys," his deep voice crackled over the line. "It's nearly midnight. You okay?" "I need a cleanup kit and a secure server, Isaiah," I said, watching Quentin's muffled panic. "I have a city official in my basement, a dead clerk's ID, and a recording that links the senator to a murder. I need you here in 20 minutes. Use the back alley. Turn off your headlights." "I'm on my way," he said, no questions asked. I hung up and turned back to Quentin. He was shaking now, tears leaking from the corners of his ruined eyes, mixing with the chemical burns on his cheeks. He looked at me, pleading. "You want to talk?" I asked, reaching for the edge of the duct tape. "I'll give you one chance. If you lie, I have a bottle of surgical-grade alcohol and a very rough sponge. We can clean those burns the easy way, or the nurse's way." I ripped the tape off. "Gladys, please." He wheezed, coughing up a bit of blood. "It wasn't just me. Sterling, he made me do it. He has photos, Gladys. Photos of Nia. He threatened her." Nia stepped forward, her face a mask of fury. "Don't you dare use my name to justify your filth. You didn't do it for me. You did it for the seat on the council. You did it for the money. The money is gone." Quentin shrieked. "It's in a blind trust. If I die, it all goes to Sterling's offshore accounts. You'll have nothing." I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just found the loose thread in a cheap sweater. "Oh, Quentin," I whispered, "I don't want your money. I want your soul. And I'm going to make sure the whole world watches while I take it." I grabbed the digital recorder and held it in front of his face. "Tell me the password to the Unity server, Quentin, the one where you keep the digital copies of the kickbacks. Tell me, or I start the medical treatment right now." I picked up a large, stainless steel syringe from my tray. It was empty, but he didn't know that. In the dim light, it looked like a needle from a nightmare. "The password," I hissed. "Now." "The password, Quentin," I repeated, my voice as cold as a morgue slab. I held the syringe just inches from his neck. "I don't have the patience I used to have in the triage room. Every second you waste is a second closer to me deciding you aren't worth the air you're breathing." He gulped, his Adam's apple bobbing frantically. It's Lazarus 77, he wheezed. "The Unity server, the folder is hidden under the maintenance logs. Please, Gladys, just let me get a doctor. My eyes feel like they're melting." You should have thought about that before you looked at Janelle Vance and saw a nuisance instead of a human being. I snapped. I turned to the old laptop I kept on my workbench. My fingers flew across the keys. Lazarus 77. The screen flickered, and then, like a tomb opening up, the files appeared. It wasn't just kickbacks. It was a digital graveyard. There were scanned photos of deeds, wire transfer receipts to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, and most chillingly, a GPS log labeled disposal sites. Nia leaned over my shoulder, her breath hitching. "Mom, those coordinates. That's the old marshland, near the bypass. And look at this one, the construction site for the new charter school." My blood ran cold. They weren't just killing people, they were burying them under the very foundations of the city's future. It was a level of depravity that made my hands shake. Senator Sterling wasn't just a corrupt politician. He was a monster building a kingdom on a bed of bones. I have it all, I whispered. The proof, the motive, the locations. Suddenly, a heavy knock echoed from the back door upstairs. 3 short, 2 long. Isaiah. I left Nia to watch Quentin, giving her my heavy kitchen shears just in case he got brave, and hurried up the stairs. I opened the door to find Isaiah standing there, a tall, shadows and stone kind of man with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He took one look at my face and the blood on my apron and stepped inside. "You look like you've been back in the trauma ward, B," he said, his voice a low rumble that usually brought me comfort. Tonight, it just sounded like the beginning of a war. "Worse," I said, leading him to the kitchen. "I've found the heart of the rot. Isaiah. Quentin is downstairs. He's the one who took Janelle, but he was taking orders from Sterling." Isaiah dropped the bag on the counter. "Sterling is a protected man, B. You poke that nest, and they don't just come for you. They burn the whole block down." "Let them try," I said, pointing to the laptop screen I had mirrored to my tablet. "I have the disposal logs. I have the wire transfers. And I have the man who pulled the trigger blinded and bound in my basement. We aren't just poking the nest. We're pouring gasoline on it." Isaiah looked at the digital recorder. He pressed play, listening to Sterling's voice commanding the permanent removal of the clerk. His jaw tightened. "This isn't just a police matter anymore. This is a revolution. What's the plan, B? You didn't call me just to hand over a flash drive." I looked out the window at the quiet, unsuspecting neighborhood. Quentin told me the money goes to Sterling if he dies. So, we aren't going to let him die. Not yet. We're going to make him disappear just like Janelle did. We're going to use his own accounts to drain Sterling dry. And then we're going to leak these coordinates to every news outlet in the state simultaneously. "And Quentin," Isaiah asked. I looked back toward the basement door. "He's going to be my patient for a while. I'm going to treat his burns, Isaiah. I'm going to keep him alive and healthy because he's going to be the star witness in a trial that will burn this city's corrupt pillars to the ground. But first, he needs to feel exactly what Janelle felt." I grabbed a bottle of sterile water and a fresh pack of gauze. "Isaiah, I need you to set up a VPN. We're going to start moving that money. If Sterling wants to play God with people's lives, he can start by being bankrupt." I walked back down to the basement. Quentin heard my footsteps and started whimpering again. "Hush now, Quentin," I said, unscrewing the cap of the water. "The doctor is in. But I should warn you, I'm all out of anesthesia. We're doing this the hard way." I poured the water over his chemical burns to neutralize the remaining lie. He screamed, a raw, jagged sound that filled the soundproofed room. I didn't flinch. I just kept pouring, my eyes as cold as the mahogany table upstairs. "You're going to tell me every name, Quentin," I whispered over his screams. "Every cop on the take, every judge in the pocket, and every grave you dug. Or I might just forget to treat the infection that's coming for you." "Please, Gladys, no more," Quentin sobbed. His face was a patchwork of raw, red skin and white gauze. I had neutralized the lie, but the damage was permanent. He would never see his face in a mirror again without remembering this night. "I told you, Quentin, the doctor doesn't stop until the patient is cured of his lies," I said, snapping on a fresh pair of latex gloves. The sound was like a gunshot in the small room. Now, we were talking about the Unity funds. Isaiah tells me there's a secondary encryption, a biometric key, usually a thumbprint or a retinal scan. I looked at his clouded, blistered eyes. A retinal scan was out of the question. I looked at his hands. zip-tied to the arms of the chair. I can't. He stammered. You can, and you will, I whispered, leaning in so close our foreheads almost touched. Because if you don't, I'm going to call your business partner, Senator Sterling. I'll tell him you've turned informant. I'll tell him you gave me the GPS coordinates for the school construction site. How long do you think you'll last in a prison where he pays the guards? The terror in his breath was a sweet perfume. He knew, in his world, a witness was just a body that hadn't been buried yet. The thumb. He choked out. The right thumb. It's a physical dongle in my briefcase, in the trunk of my car. I didn't waste a second. I signaled Nia to stay put and headed out to the garage. Quentin's sleek, black European sedan sat there like a crouching predator. I popped the trunk. Inside was a leather briefcase, smelling of expensive cologne and old secrets. I found the USB dongle, a small, silver device that looked innocent enough to the untrained eye. I brought it back to Isaiah. Here, this is the key to Sterling's kingdom. Isaiah plugged it in. The screen of the laptop transformed. Spreadsheets disappeared, replaced by a live feed of bank balances that made my head spin. Millions of dollars, blood money, diverted from public housing, from school lunches, from the very people I had served my whole life. Look at this, B, Isaiah said, pointing to a recurring payment. Every month, a massive transfer goes to a company called Vanguard Security. That's not a security firm. That's a mercenary group. Sterling isn't just a politician. He's building a private army. Can you stop the transfers? I asked. Better. Isaiah grinned, a shark-like expression. I can reroute them. I can send this month's payroll to a series of untraceable accounts that will drip-feed the families of the victims Sterling has removed, starting with Janelle Vance's children. Do it, I said, but leave enough to send a message. I grabbed the digital recorder. I want you to send a file to Sterling's personal, encrypted phone. Just one file. The recording of him telling Quentin to clean up Janelle and attach a photo. A photo of what? Isaiah asked. I looked at the mahogany table in the dining room. A photo of the floor under that table. Let him know that the secrets are coming out from the shadows. As Isaiah worked his magic, I went back to the kitchen and brewed a pot of coffee. My hands were steady. I felt younger than I had in years. The betrayal I had felt, the realization that my daughter had been living with a murderer, had crystallized into a sharp, lethal purpose. Suddenly, Quentin's phone, sitting on the counter, began to vibrate. The caller ID showed a single gold star. Senator Sterling. The room went cold. Isaiah looked at me, his hand hovering over the enter key. He knows, I whispered. The moment we accessed that server, a silent alarm must have gone off. He's calling his dog to see if he's still on the leash. Do I answer it? Nia asked, her voice trembling. No, I said, picking up the phone with a gloved hand. We let it ring. Let him sweat. Let him wonder why his golden boy isn't picking up. And then we send the file. The phone stopped ringing. A second later, a text message popped up. Quentin, report now, or the cleanup crew comes to you. I looked at Nia, then at Isaiah. We were past the point of no return. We weren't just seeking justice. We were in a race against a professional hit squad. Isaiah, how long until the money is moved? 5 minutes for the first batch. 10 for the full drain. Nia, get Desmond. I said, my voice hardening. We aren't staying here. We're moving Quentin to the old clinic. It's been abandoned for years, but I still have the keys. We need a place where we can control the perimeter. But Mom, what about the house? I looked at the beautiful home I'd worked my whole life to pay for. The mahogany table, the lace curtains, the memories. It's just wood and brick, Nia. If they want to burn it down, let them. but they'll find nothing but ashes and the truth. I went back to the basement. Quentin was sagging in the chair, the fight drained out of him. Up you get, Quentin, I said, loosening the zip ties on his legs just enough for him to stumble. We're going for a ride. And don't bother screaming. The neighbors are used to me leaving for the night shift. As we loaded him into the back of Isaiah's van, I saw a black SUV turn the corner at the end of the block. No headlights. No plates. The cleanup crew had arrived. They're behind us, Nia whispered, clutching Desmond in the middle seat. The boy was eerily silent, staring at the floor of the van. He had seen too much, but I knew that the blood of the women in our family ran through his veins. He wasn't breaking. He was hardening. I see them, Isaiah growled, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. They're hanging back. They don't want a scene in the suburbs. They're waiting for us to hit the industrial district. Let them follow, I said, checking the contents of my nursing bag. The old St. Jude's Clinic is only 4 miles away. It's a maze of lead-lined walls and reinforced doors. If they want a fight, we'll give them one where I know every floorboard and oxygen line. In the back, Quentin was a heap of groans and muffled whimpers. He was slumped against the side of the van, his expensive suit stained with the fluids of his own cowardice. He knew exactly what St. Jude's was. It was the place where he'd held his first community outreach event back when he was still pretending to care about the neighborhood. Now it was going to be his cage. We reached the clinic, a crumbling brick monolith that looked like a ghost ship in the moonlight. I hopped out and unlocked the heavy iron gate, the chain rattling like the bones of the secrets we were carrying. Isaiah drove the van straight into the loading bay, and I slammed the shutter down, locking us in the darkness. Nia, take Desmond to the old records room. It has no windows and a steel door, I commanded. Isaiah, I need the tactical gear you brought. And the signal jammer. You really think you can take them, B? Isaiah asked, tossing me a heavy vest. These aren't city council thugs. These are professionals. Professionals follow a playbook, Isaiah, I said, tightening the straps of the vest over my cardigan. I've spent 40 years working in the dark, dealing with people who don't follow rules. I know this building's circulatory system. I know where the air flows and where the traps are. I turned to Quentin. I dragged him out of the van and shoved him into an old wheelchair that sat rusting in the corner. I wheeled him into the center of the surgical theater, the overhead lights flickering as I flipped the ancient breaker. Why here? Quentin wheezed, his voice cracking. Gladys, please, just take the money and go. I can give you more. There's a hidden account. Vesper, 9. I don't want your Vesper money, Quentin, I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out a series of 4 bags and tubing. I brought you here because this is where Janelle's sister used to work. She was a nurse here, too, before she died of the cancer your renewal project caused by dumping toxins in the water. This is holy ground, and you're the sacrifice. I began setting up in 4-line, but it wasn't for medicine. I hooked up a bag of concentrated saline and something I'd synthesized in my basement, a paralytic that would keep him awake and sensitive to every touch, but unable to move a single muscle. What are you doing? He gasped, his clouded eyes widening. I'm making sure you're a good listener. I whispered. Isaiah, is the jammer on? Locked down, Isaiah said, appearing in the doorway with a shotgun. They're outside. They're testing the doors. We have maybe 10 minutes before they blow the locks. Perfect, I said. I picked up the digital recorder and clipped it to Quentin's lapel. I'm going to broadcast the recording of the senator over the building's old PA system. I want his men to hear exactly how much their boss thinks they're worth. And then I'm going to show them what happens when a nurse loses her patients. I looked at the surgical tray. Scalpels, clamps, and a very old, very sharp bone saw. You think you're a predator, Quentin? I asked, leaning into his ear. In this building, I'm the one who decides who lives and who is dealt with. And I've decided that you're going to be the bait. I turned on the PA system. The feedback hummed through the hallways, a ghostly sound that echoed into the night. Then, the voice of Senator Sterling filled the air, cold and murderous, detailing the elimination of the clerk. Outside, I heard the first explosion. The hunters were inside, but they didn't realize they had just walked into an operating room. And I was the lead surgeon. Isaiah, take the service elevator to the 3rd floor. I whispered into the walkie-talkie clipped to my vest. When they reached the pharmacy, vent the canisters. Nia, keep Desmond under the desk. Don't move until you hear the fire alarm. I stood in the center of the darkened surgical suite, the only light coming from the single lamp above Quentin's head. He was fully under the influence of the paralytic now. His eyes were wide, darting back and forth in terror, but his body was a statue. He couldn't even twitch a finger. I had tapped into the building's ancient PA system, and Sterling's recorded voice was on a loop, echoing through the halls like a confession from the grave. Make it look like an accident, Quentin. No one cares about a clerk. Just put her in the ground and pave it over. I heard the first set of boots reach the double doors of the theater. I didn't hide. I sat in a chair, just outside the circle of light, holding a glass of water. The doors burst open. 2 men in matte black gear swung their rifles into the room, the red dots of their laser sights dancing across the walls. They stopped when they saw Quentin strapped to the chair, his face a ruined mask of blisters and gauze. Target located. One of them clipped into his shoulder. Mike, he's alive, but he looks compromised. Drop the weapons, gentlemen, I said, my voice projecting with the authority of a head nurse on a chaotic Friday night. Both rifles snapped toward the shadows where I sat. Identify yourself. Hands where we can see them. My name is Gladys, I said, stepping into the light. I didn't have a gun. I had something much more effective. I held up a small, remote detonator, the kind used for the old building's emergency oxygen shut-off valves. And you are standing in a room that has been saturated with pure medical-grade oxygen for the last 20 minutes. One spark, one muzzle flash, and this entire wing becomes a funeral pyre, including you, including Quentin. The lead mercenary froze. He looked at the floor, seeing the thin plastic tubes I'd snaked from the wall outlets. He could smell it now, that crisp, dry scent that makes a single match feel like a bomb. You're bluffing, old woman, the second one hissed, though his finger moved away from the trigger. Try me, I said, my eyes locking onto his. I've seen what fire does to the human body. I've spent years debriding skin from men who thought they were invincible. Do you want to know what it feels like when your lungs ignite from the inside out? Because I can show you. Through the PA system, Isaiah's voice broke in. B, the second team is in the pharmacy. I'm dropping the gas. A muffled thud echoed from the floor below. I'd helped Isaiah rig the old fire suppression canisters with a mixture of concentrated anesthetic and light dust, a nasty little cocktail that would blind them and knock them out in seconds. Your friends are currently taking a very long nap, I told the 2 men in front of me. Now, I have a proposal. You work for Sterling. He pays you to kill. But the money you're expecting? It's gone. My friend Isaiah just finished draining the senator's primary accounts. If you kill us, you're doing it for free. And Sterling? He's a dead man walking. When those coordinates go live, he'll be the most wanted man in the country. The lead mercenary lowered his rifle an inch. You're lying about the money. Check your phone. I challenged. I know your Vanguard accounts have a balance notification. Check it and see the 0. He hesitated, then reached for a device on his belt. His eyes went wide under his visor. The betrayal was instant. These men didn't have loyalty. They had price tags. And I had just ripped the tags off. What do you want? He asked, his voice losing its edge. I want the name of the man who actually buried Janelle, I said, stepping toward Quentin. Quentin here says he just watched. I want the man with the shovel. And I want you to take Quentin to the front steps of the police station, the central one, not the precinct Sterling owns. You're going to leave him there with this recorder around his neck. And us. You're going to disappear, I said, because if you ever come near my family again, I won't use oxygen next time. I'll use the records I found in Quentin's briefcase, the ones with your real names and your family's addresses. It was a lie. I didn't have their addresses, but a good nurse knows how to deliver a placebo with absolute conviction. They looked at Quentin, then at each other. They grabbed the wheelchair, turning the golden boy into a piece of luggage. As they wheeled him out, the lead man stopped. You're one cold lady, Gladys. No, I said, watching them go. I'm just a woman who's tired of seeing the trash pile up. I waited until the sound of their van faded. I went to the records room and opened the door. Nia and Desmond came out, the boy reaching for my hand. Is it over, Grandma? Almost, baby, I said, looking at the tablet in my hand. The upload was at 99%. Just one more click. I hit enter. The coordinates, the recordings, and the bank records hit every major news desk in the country. The vintage vengeance wasn't just about a man in a basement. It was about burning down the entire forest to save one tree. I sat on the front steps of the clinic, the cool morning air biting at my skin. My bones ached with a fatigue that went deeper than muscles. It was the weight of carrying a monster's secrets for 24 hours. Isaiah stood beside me, his eyes glued to a small tablet. It's a feeding frenzy, B, he said, his voice carrying a hint of awe. The governor has already called for a special prosecutor. The coordinates for the school site. The police are there now with cadaver dogs. They've already found the first remains. I closed my eyes for a second, picturing Janelle. I hoped her spirit was finally moving away from that mahogany table and into the light. And Sterling? I asked. He tried to flee to his private airstrip in Linden. Isaiah replied, scrolling through a live feed. But his Vanguard security team, the ones you tipped off about the empty bank accounts, they didn't fly him out. They held him there until the state police arrived. He's in custody, B. No bail. No phone calls. Nia walked out of the clinic, holding Desmond's hand. She looked older, the innocence that had once defined her replaced by a sharp, flinty resolve. She looked at me, and for the first time in years, she really saw me. Not just as the grandmother who baked pies, but as the woman who had held the line against the dark. What happens to Quentin now, Mom? She asked quietly. He's at the central precinct. I said, the paralytic will wear off in an hour. When it does, he'll find himself in an interrogation room with a dozen federal agents, and the recording of his own boss ordering a hit. He's going to flip Nia. He'll tell them everything just to save his own skin. He'll never see Desmond again. She whispered, a statement, not a question. Never, I promised. But there was one piece of business left. A betrayal this deep doesn't just end with handcuffs. I stood up and took the phone from Isaiah. I had one last number to call, a private line I'd pulled from Quentin's encrypted logs. It belonged to the woman who had been Sterling's shadow for 20 years, his wife, Althea. She answered on the first ring. Who is this? How did you get this number? My name is Gladys, I said, my voice steady and cold. I'm the woman who just dismantled your husband's empire. I'm the woman who saw the blood on the ID badge he kept as a souvenir. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. What do you want? I have lawyers. I don't want your lawyers, Althea. I want the ledger. I interrupted. I know about the second book. The one that lists the names of the developers who paid for the accidents at the construction sites. The The one you keep in the safe deposit box under your maiden name. I don't know what you're talking about, she hissed. Listen closely, I said, leaning against the cold brick of the clinic. The police are on their way to your estate. You have 10 minutes. You can either be a co-conspirator who goes down with the ship, or you can be the grieving wife who cooperated with the authorities. If you leave that ledger on the front seat of your car and walk away, I'll make sure the prosecutor knows you were under duress. If you don't, I have a recording of you discussing the disposal costs with Quentin. It was the final bluff. I didn't have that recording, but I knew people like Althea. They are built on self-preservation. 10 minutes, she whispered, and the line went dead. I looked at Isaiah and nodded. She's going to give it up. The whole deck of cards is falling. I turned to my daughter and grandson. The sun was fully up now, burning away the mist. We had lost our home, our peace, and the man Nia thought she loved. But as I looked at Desmond, I saw him standing tall, his shoulders back. He wasn't afraid of the shadows under the table anymore. Let's go, Isaiah, I said. I want to be at the station when they bring Quentin in. I want him to see my face one last time before the cell door closes. The drive back to the city was silent. We passed the neighborhood where I'd lived for 40 years. My house was cordoned off with yellow tape, a grim reminder of the night's violence. But I didn't feel sadness. I felt a strange, clinical satisfaction. The infection had been cut out. The wound was open, but it could finally begin to heal. As we pulled up to the precinct, a swarm of reporters blocked the entrance. And then the transport van arrived. The back doors opened, and 2 officers pulled Quentin out. He was slumped, his face still red and raw from the lie, his eyes darting around in a sightless panic. He looked small. He looked pathetic. I stepped out of Isaiah's van and walked to the edge of the police line. Quentin seemed to sense me. He turned his head, his milky eyes searching the crowd. Gladys, he croaked, his voice barely audible over the shouting media. I didn't say a word. I just reached into my pocket, pulled out a single clean nursing badge, my own, and held it up. A symbol of the life I had led, a life of service and truth, compared to the filth he had built. The lady under the table says goodbye. Quentin, I whispered. 6 months have passed since that night under the mahogany table. I am sitting on a porch, but it isn't the one I spent 40 years paying for. That house is gone, sold to a family who will hopefully fill it with laughter instead of whispers. I took the money, combined it with the consulting fee Isaiah managed to squeeze out of the senator's seized assets, and bought a quiet piece of land far from the city's rot. Nia is different now. She doesn't jump at the sound of a closing door. She's working at a nonprofit, helping women who have been silenced by powerful men. And Desmond? He's playing in the yard right now, a normal boy again. He doesn't look under tables anymore. He looks at the horizon. Quentin is in a maximum security facility, serving life without the possibility of parole. Because his face was so badly damaged, he spent most of his time in the infirmary, a place where the nurses know exactly who he is and what he did. I hear they follow the Gladys method of care. Everything by the book, but not a drop of extra comfort. He is blind, broken, and utterly alone, haunted by the digital recordings that the prosecution played over and over during the trial. Senator Sterling didn't even make it to the verdict. When the ledger I squeezed out of Althea hit the light of day, his own Vanguard associates realized he was a liability. He was found in his cell with a bedsheet and a heavy heart, though many say he was helped along by the very people he used to pay. As for me, I've retired my nursing scrubs for good. But I kept one thing from the old house. I kept that heavy, antique mahogany table. It sits in our new dining room. A beautiful piece of history that has been sanded down and refinished. The loose floorboard is gone. The secrets are gone. It's just a table again. Every Sunday, we sit around it. We eat our greens, we share our stories, and we remember that while evil can be loud and powerful, it is no match for a grandmother with a sharp mind and a cold resolve. I am 65 years old, and I have learned that justice isn't always found in a courtroom. Sometimes it's found in the dark, in the quiet, and in the hands of those who refuse to be victims. I look at the scars on my hands, not from lie, but from years of work. I am Gladys. I am a nurse, a mother, and a survivor. And if you ever find yourself thinking that a woman of my age is past her prime, just remember Quentin. Remember the man who thought he could hide a murder under my feet. The vintage doesn't just age. Honey, it gets stronger. And it always seeks its vengeance. And that is how you handle a monster. I didn't just survive. I dismantled a criminal empire with a skillet and a nursing degree. This story is a reminder to every person out there. Never, ever underestimate the power of a woman who has nothing left to lose and everything to protect. If this story gave you chills, if you cheered when I threw that lie, and if you believe that justice should always be served cold, then you are officially part of the Vintage Vengeance family. Stop right now and check if you're subscribed. If that button is still red, you're missing out on the most calculated, aggressive, and satisfying revenge stories on the internet. Hit that like button to honor Janelle's memory. And comment Gladys Rains below to let me know you watched until the very end. Don't forget to click the video on your screen right now to see our next story of a betrayal that went too far. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant, and remember, I'm always watching.